Hey there, bibliophiles and those raising bibliophiles. Are you looking to find good books worthy of your children to read and wondering which ones you may want to avoid? Well, join me for today's book review to see if today's book should be added to your to-read list or your bad book list. So today's book review is for Forgotten 5, Operation Chaos by Lisa McMann, and this is book 5 in the Forgotten 5 series. And if you have followed any of my reviews before, then you would know that book 4 was my dropping off point. I did have questions or things that were odd for me in the first couple of books, but book 4 definitely was downhill. And from then on, I was really not allowing my children to read these series anymore. Now, with that being said, I did want to continue reading the series because I want to see how Lisa McMann was going to continue to develop the series. There were some things that were introduced in book 4 that I felt were not appropriate. Definitely to me seemed to have an agenda. So go back and look at that review if you are interested in that at all. I will say with book 5, I was pleasantly surprised that there was none of that in here. And so I was very glad for that. However, at the same time, because of book 4, I'm pretty much done with this series as far as letting my children read them. However, every family is different, so my point here is just to give you the information and let you make the decisions that are right for you and your family. In general, ever since I started the series, some parts of it seem to always sit uneasy with me. I'm not sure if that was meant to be undertones within the story or the series, or if McMann was just really using those particular parts of society as a model for things that she was going to develop within the series and for her fictional world of Estero. Again, this continues sort of into book 5, some of those aspects, those misgivings that I have, but I'm just gonna be more charitable in the sense that maybe she is well-meaning and isn't trying to be subversive in any way. Now, if you have not followed my other reviews so far in this series, you may have no idea what I'm referring to. The Forgotten 5 series is a fantasy series by Lisa McMann in which the supers, the people who have superpowers, are discriminated against in society. The first in the series opens with the children of notorious super criminals, and Luis, the father, has died, who has been with the children. The other parents had left and gone back to Estero. So now the children in book 1 leave to go back. They're trying to find what happened to their missing parents. In this world and society, the supers have special abilities like X-ray vision. They can communicate with animals. They can be invisible. They can camouflage. They can do mind control, different things like that. Everyone's a little bit different. The current president of Estero, who's also a secretly super, in one of the last, book 3 or 4, I can't remember exactly, but he's ousted as also being a super. And he initially had laws that made being super criminalized, and then recently he's changed those and to be more favorable. Meanwhile, Magdala, who is the mother of one of the children, she's also running for president against the current president, and she's hoping to make the world a better place for supers. So there's a lot that I'm leaving out, but that really summarizes the main plot of the series thus far. Book 4 introduces Cabot as a character who is binary, and that was one of the aspects that I describe and explain in the book review for that book that I felt was really out of place and inappropriate. And Cabot's character in general, there's a lot of her development in book 4 that was, I don't know, book 4 in general, there's not a lot of action. It's a lot of character development. But in this book, she doesn't play such a strong role at all. Very much complementary to a lot of things going on and mainly in the background. So book 5 is going to open up where book 4 sort of left off. Birdie is waking up in the hospital after being arrested at the rally. She got hurt severely. She's flung from a horse, and she's supposed to be on her way to the prison detention center. But she will eventually be rerouted by the commander of the police, who has been secretly on their side the whole time. So just to give you a little taste of the book, I'm just going to read sort of the beginning. The first chapter is titled Under Arrest. Several days after Bertie Golden had been arrested in her hospital bed following Magdala's rally, a nurse came in for a routine check of the girl's injuries. Bertie had been diagnosed with a severe concussion and a simple skull fracture from flying off the police horse and hitting her head on the stone fountain at the park. She remembered thinking during the chase that a helmet would have been a good idea, but she didn't recall anything after that. The doctors had been worried about her brain since she'd arrived. She also had a cut that had required 11 stitches, and they'd shaved part of her hair to fix it, which was awful, but not the worst part of the whole ordeal. If only Bricks had been allowed in her room to heal her, he could have taken away the pain in a few minutes. That's her brother. But getting healed would have only hastened things along for what would be happening next, and that was the last thing Bertie wanted. "You're being discharged today," the nurse whispered. Bertie's eyes widened in fear. When she left here, she wouldn't be enjoying the safety of the monastery cottage or the company of her family and friends. She was an alleged criminal and would be going to jail. The unknown was terrifying. What would it be like? She recalled Tenor's description of the jeering prisoners who were being held at the police station, and she could picture the cold gray walls of the penitentiary they'd visited when looking for her mom, Elena. Would she be headed to one of those places? She couldn't decide which would be worse. So that's sort of the opening of the story. That is what Bertie is dealing with at the very beginning. And then it proceeds to what I was explaining. Like, she thinks that she's being taken to this detention center, and actually she's not. This book also, kind of like book 4, continues to have that character development, but this time it's really focused on Bricks, the 10-year-old brother, and Seven as one of the main focus for their character development. Seven reunites with his mother in this particular book, and so he's having to navigate his feelings in that entire situation. Bricks, on the other hand, is really the mastermind between a lot of the action that takes place in this particular book. And he's only 10 years old, but then he's giving like advice and the adults are listening to it. That was one aspect of the book that, especially in the series, and I know I mentioned that in my book 4 review, but you see sort of this shift of, instead of the parents so much taking their role, it's like the children are speaking back to the parents and like teaching them how to parent. The team is running out of money in this particular book, and so they need to recover some of the stolen stash money that's been hidden by the parents originally. The money is in an elephant statue in a museum, and so Bricks sort of plans the plan to get out of that. And then the librarian, one of the helpers in the story, who also has a special ability of making people forget things, she is taken prisoner by the current president and his team, and so a bulk of the book is them trying to figure out how they're going to get her out because she's been taken prisoner. Unfortunately, of course, things don't go as planned. Seven gets left behind because he's invisible, and so work has to be done to basically get him back and get him out in the story. And so there's a lot of action and stuff that goes around all of that. So while I no longer care for this particular series, and I'm definitely not going to recommend it, I would say that I was pleasantly surprised that there was no objectionable content in book 5, especially given what was presented in book 4. I was definitely expecting more along those lines, and not once was any of that mentioned, which is awkward and weird on some level, but also good. A few things of note, in book 4, you have this introduction of this new mantra that the children have, which is kids first always, and that's definitely presented a few more times in this particular book as they go back to that. ECAT, one of the characters, reveals to Leda, another one of the characters, that she's actually her mother, and so her whole story is presented within the story that develops that line. Budding romance continues between Leda and Tenor, but it's a more quiet. The real development is really between Seven and Bertie, because we see some animosity and hurt from Tenor, or from Seven being left behind. Bertie feels terrible about it, and then Seven starts to kind of realize that it's not fair for him to treat her as harshly about the event as he does, and then they basically confess that they like each other. Tenor and Troy's relationship does develop in a positive way. Tenor starts to forgive his father, and they start to be more amiable towards one another. Bethune is another child that Magdala in book 4 adopts, And so coming to terms with sort of that is presented in this particular book. And Seven confronts his mother about her behavior towards him in the past. And then again, the mom, Magdala, when she's talking with Bethune about this, like, he's the one giving her advice and being wise. And so that, along with Brix trying to convince Sabine to go against her father, who is the current president, and revealing stuff about him, Brix sort of, I feel like, manipulates her into playing that role. But that's definitely another thing that's in there. And he says, so one of the quotes, I'm just going to give you the quote. So Brix, when he's speaking to Sabine, when he's trying to get Sabine to turn against her father, he says, your dad is the one who wrecked things. He won't let you do anything without telling you exactly how to do it. He's been controlling you to the extreme. And so, I don't know, a 10-year-old saying this to an adult, I just don't know if that really aligns. But it's also a fantasy fiction story for middle grade readers, so you got to take some of that with that. And then the librarian at the very end, when they have this speech, sort of like almost like a rally, but not quite a rally, with all the people who are on their team as they're setting up for sort of, I'm assuming that the next book will be the end of the series, but who knows? But it seems to be positioning it that way. She says, the election is less than 3 months away. We must elect Magdala Palacio and defeat President Daniel Fuerte and bring equality for supers to Estero. Then she added, and one more thing, something we haven't addressed already, we need to remove the super-hating police officers from the force. And that's one of those undertone things in the story that I don't know if the author was using that as a basis for like a model for building things, or if there were undertones that she's really trying to communicate. I'm still going to add this to my not to read list. I do concede that McMann did a much better job with this book than she did in book 4. There's definitely more action. There is some character development in a positive way, with the exception of Brix sort of giving advice to the adults, and the adults, you know, constantly mentioning how wise these children are. We should listen to the children because they're more wise than we are. So those are some of the elements and some of the themes in the story, just to share those with you. Hopefully you find that helpful as you are making decisions for you and your family. And I hope you will join me next week for another book review.